This is We the Sales Engineers Podcast, show 286.
Welcome to We the SEs Podcast, the show for sales engineers by sales engineers with your host, Ramsey Majaba.
What's up, SE Nation? Welcome back to another episode. I have a guest today by the name of Paul Harris, and we talked about way too many things. Well, it sounds like that's a bad thing. It's a good thing. We talked about his journey. His journey is interesting because he's made decisions and been pushed into things and he had to get out of. So if anyone's running through, if anyone feels like their career is happening to them instead of them controlling their career, I think this is a good podcast to listen to, at least the first half, because that's what happened to him. He doesn't say that flat out, but it sounds like it's what happened to him. And then he dealt with it. So it'll be a good example. And then we talked about the evolution of sales engineering, what it was like before the pandemic and what it's like now and where Paul thinks it's going to be. I really enjoyed the conversation with Paul. I hope you enjoyed it as well. And let's just jump into the show. Mr. Harris, good to have you on the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Ramsey. It's great to finally be on. It's been, as we were just saying before we jumped on, I know we don't say we have the conversation, but we feel like we know each other, even though we've never met. But now it's fantastic to be talking to you.
Yeah, well, we've been circling each other. I see you post, I comment on your post. Sometimes I agree, sometimes I disagree, and you do this with my posts. So it's always good. And to finally meet, we just met. It's not like we had a previous chat. Yeah. We jumped on. Now we're gonna have a podcast about sales engineering and the future of sales engineering. It seems like.
Yeah, for sure.
But before we talk about the future, how about we talk about the past all the way to the present? Who are you? What are you doing? How did you get here?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Paul. I'm a principal solution architect at Loftware, which is a company that we are really focused on supply chain enablement. So really how products get from the factory down to the distribution and out onto the shelves. So big range of industries. Lots of time spent in factories and distribution centers, less so these days, obviously, right? But in the past, I spent a long time going around those. I've been in sales engineering about 4.5 years. Prior to that, I came up through what I guess you could say is one of the more common routes, which was through support. So I was working in a number of different support roles, IT support, networking, then in a customer support role, and that was in 2017 to 2018. In 2018, that company was acquired by Loftware, and then my director at the time was like, "Hey, you should come and do pre-sales." And I can still tell you to this day, I sat in a room and I was like, "I am not a sales guy. I don't want to do sales. I never do sales." A year later, I went full time as an SE, so clearly that kind of shows that journey. And I think, in that time, in the last 4.5 years, I've been through a number of different roles. Now my kind of focus is a little bit of a split. I spend a portion of my time working, obviously, with customers, working with account execs, working on deals. But I also spend a decent chunk of time working on internal projects. So collaborating with marketing, with sales, and with our sales enablement on kind of how we can work together and upskill the whole team. And what we can bring from a pre-sales side.
All right. Okay. Just writing down so many notes. All right. Okay. First things first. You went from not wanting to be a sales guy.
Yes.
And within a year, you're an SE. What was that process? It sounds like, oh yeah, it just happened, but yeah, sure, there's a journey there.
Yeah, there is, and I think I always say it that way because it's kind of like it was on the one hand there was a bit of a journey, but also it kind of just happened, not overnight, right? But it happened in a very short space of time. So as I mentioned, there was my director at the time, the great guy. I still work with him actually now in a different kind of capacity, but he came in, and at the time, the team, we did pre and post sales. So you would sell and you'd implement. It was quite sort of transactional selling. It wasn't really very value based. It was much more, we would turn up as an SE, you'd do a demo, and then the sales guy would close out the opportunity. He was saying to me, "Look, I want you to give pre-sales a try. I think you'd be really good at it. And there's an opportunity here because I'm actually going to split the team. We're going to have a dedicated post-sales team and a dedicated pre-sales team. And you really need to give pre-sales a try before you just completely write it off. And I was like, okay, let's kind of see what this is all about. And I can tell you, I remember being in a room, that kind of moment when the scales kind of fell from my eyes, and I was like, oh, hang on a minute. This isn't selling in what you think it like. I think of Gil from The Simpsons whenever like people talk about a traditional sales guy, like he's desperate to get that deal and stuff. And I would even say right now, like enterprise selling, that isn't even what sales guys do. But that was my prejudice, my perception of sales. But getting in and being like, oh, no, my job here is to clearly understand what the product does, be able to show how it works. And I was like, this overlaps with what I'm already doing. And I know that like you've had, guests before that like I kind of end up doing pre-sales kind of by accident and not knowing I'm in pre-sales. And I'm realizing, oh, actually, this is all the stuff that I like doing. And that's kind of what kind of put me on that path. And I spent a bit of time going, right, let's give consulting a try. And I did a couple of projects and they went well. But honestly, I just didn't have the attention span to stick with them. And I found in pre-sales, I was like, hey, you know what? I can kind of get into this. It's a much quicker engagement. It's much more reactive. Sure, there are some deals that kind of might feel like they drag on a lot, but the feedback is a lot quicker than in a kind of consulting world.
So when you say consulting, what is that? Because a lot of SEs are called solution consultants. So I just want to differentiate.
Post-sales implementation.
Okay. So within your company, post-sales implementation and consulting are kind of synonymous.
Yes, yeah. I'm a solution architect, and then we have solution engineers is the kind of role that we call that. We've called it it's been a mixture of post-sales and delivery teams.
Okay.
But when I talk about that, that's the team that goes in and actually implements the solution that's been sold.
Yeah, whatever the sales team sold. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
So basically, if I understand correctly, you trusted your director and you just gave it a shot.
Yeah.
And through giving it a shot, you figured out like, actually, this is something I enjoy and I've done it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
And he got to a point where he said, you need to now make a decision. And that was so this was all kind of that journey I mentioned, was the acquisition happened in March of 2018. The conversation about I'm not a sales guy was in May.
Yep.
By October, which felt like a long time, but really wasn't, he had me on site shadowing him doing pre-sales, going, this is what pre-sales is like. And then when we got to December, he said, well, next year is when the team's going to split. And there's going to be an opportunity probably in around sort of March, April time, end of Q1, start of Q2, to go full-time in pre-sales. And you need to make a decision what route you're going to take. And I think he was like, you could come back if you want to, but you need to make a decision now. And that's when I was like, okay.
It's amazing to have such a leader, right?
Yeah.
On the team.
Yeah.
He saw something in you and he pushed you, and he didn't take, he would have taken no for an answer, but I feel like he saw that you don't fully understand what it means to be a sales engineer or solution engineer, architect.
Exactly.
Nice. Yeah. I love that. I actually want to meet that person now.
Yeah. I said to him, he's become a good friend of mine, and I kind of, without being hyperbolic, I owe my career to him, really. I think to those conversations, to that persistence of being like, no, seriously, give it a try.
Yeah.
And then you get that.
I have I didn't have that, but I had a manager that I feel similar about him that you do. So, and it's always nice to have that one person that we feel like, all right, you know what, they did something for us, and makes me want to do something for somebody else as well, which is amazing. All right, I have a bunch of questions based on what you said earlier as well. You said principal, solution, architect.
Yes.
What is principal?
So principal is, if you think about the kind of structure of, and it varies across different organizations, but you have two tracks when you're kind of going up in the ranks in an organization. You come in and there'll be kind of entry level. So if we typically in sales engineering, you'll see like the associate SE is the entry level role. Then you can go up to being an SE to a senior SE, and at that point the track splits, and you can either go and be like an initial manager, or you kind of have this route to being a principal. And I for a time I was, and actually I'm actually going back into management at the start of next year. But I tried management a couple of years ago and just found it wasn't right for me, and I was just like, this is not right at this time. But what the principal role gives me is I always describe it as a leadership position without any management. And leadership and management are two distinct things. Management obviously is making sure that your people have what they need, helping if they have issues, ensuring that they're on the right track. But leadership is about, for me, kind of helping to set a vision for that team, for your organization, and being able to kind of get engaged in some of those longer term projects, maybe some of the more complex opportunities that come along, because it's a recognition that, hey, you're someone that we want to take up the organization, but hey, you don't do management right now, that's absolutely fine. But here, actually, this is a recognition and a role that is a little different to that. So it kind of is this next step above senior SE, but it's not a management role.
A friend of mine, his name is John White. He talks about the radius of impact, and like if someone has the same radius of impact as an SE manager, that's when like you can still have a radius of impact without the title of SE manager, and it sounds like you have the same radius of impact.
Yeah,
like that.
So.
All right. I don't know if you want to talk about this, but I'm going to ask it, and if you don't, let me know. Why was the manager role not right for you 2 years ago, but it will be right for you next year?
So yeah, sure, happy to talk about it. So I think 2 years ago, so when you think that was, we were during COVID, during the pandemic, I'd actually just become a dad for the first time in that period as well. And it was like this whole thing was coming at me like a whirlwind. I'd only been in pre-sales and sales engineering for a couple of years at this point, and I kind of fell into that management role more by accident than by choice, in that there were different kind of people were coming and going out of the organization, and I ended up kind of landing in that role, finding myself now with a team that I had to manage. And it was less sort of an imposter syndrome, it's more of like a realization going, I need to put the brakes on this a little bit, because I don't even feel like I have the right level of confidence in how to go out and execute as an SE on my own, let alone be a model to other people. And it kind of that thing I was saying about leadership and management, as I did a course in that. And I was going, this is definitely a route I want to get to, but right now I want to focus on what I need. And that needs, and so it's in some ways it was a bit of a selfish decision to say, well, look, I need to focus on me, I need to go and focus on my own development, and go away and do that. And that's what I did. The difference now, and the role that's coming up, is it's coming as a part of a bigger reorganization of how the team's going to operate. So it's being done in a more ordered, formalized way, rather than just sort of like overnight suddenly being, oh, by the way, you now have this title, you're now this person, and you now have this team.
Right.
Whereas I'm going through a transition period. I'm going to be taking on a team. They know that I'm taking that team on. I've met with them. I'm working with my director and my current manager to have worked through that transition, to get into that, to ensure that when I really take that on come next year, I'm going to be ready and I'm going to have the right support behind me. So I think it's a case of, I didn't feel ready the first time, and now I've spent some more time in the field. I've built up that experience, and I now feel like I can be effective in that role.
Well, I feel, I don't know if this is true, but I feel that many people that were in your position wouldn't have come to that realization, or would have just went through it and slogged through it until they hated their career or their life or whatever. How did you recognize that issue?
I wasn't getting satisfaction out of it. I wasn't finding it. I was feeling like I wasn't succeeding at what I needed to do. And it felt like I was coming up short. And I think one thing I found about all SEs in this community, we all set very, very high expectations of ourselves. And we always come out of a demo, of a presentation going, I could have done this better. I could have done that better. And there is some truth to that, I think, sometimes. And there's a healthy kind of self-critique that you can do. But I was just in that space. It just didn't feel like the right thing for me to do. And I was like, an opportunity actually opened up at another. If you look at my LinkedIn, you'll see that I kind of was with Loftware for, after that acquisition up until 2021. I actually left for about a year to go into a completely different organization, go and get some experience. And then I was very grateful to be given the opportunity to come back when this principal role came up. And it was kind of like going and you could call it maybe a bit of a sabbatical, taking a bit of time away to just sort of reflect on what does it mean for me to be in this job, and what is it, coming back to when I was saying, right, I'd chosen to jump into pre-sales. I felt like I was falling out of love with it. Okay. And I felt like I wasn't able to kind of execute effectively.
Okay. In my head, like the entire time you were talking, I felt like did you have conversations with your leadership at that time about like your frustrations or your
I did, yeah. And I think honestly, I think it was just that there was a lot of change going on in the organization at that time anyway. There's a lot of disruption.
Right.
And I'd kind of been pushing to get that position, and then I kind of got into it and thought, oh, hang on a minute, this isn't what I wanted, and now I have to find a route out. And I had some of those conversations, but I think it felt like I needed to just step away from what I was doing entirely. And I think going and you can, and again, I know people who have very effectively gone into that management role and gone, hang on a minute, it isn't for me, and then successfully been able to transition over into something else. Looking back, I wonder if that opportunity would have existed. Maybe it did, and I think, did I give the company a fair crack at why I should stay? Probably not. But I think whenever you get to a point where you're like, you have your mindset on, I'm going to go and do something else, you go and do that other thing, and you have to sort of find a way to bring yourself back to where you want to be.
That makes so much sense. I mean, it was a tough position to be in. I know I've been in a similar position where I pushed to, early on in my career as a sales engineer, I pushed to go into sales.
Yeah.
And then I hated every second of it. And luckily enough, I had a good relationship with my manager, and they hadn't been able to find an SE to replace me. So I knew I could go back 6 months later. But yeah, like if they had replaced me at that time, that conversation would have been very different, right? Like I would have had to either move or stick with the sales gig, which God, I would have hated. Like I'm in sales now, and management makes such a big difference in terms of doing that. So okay, I love that. All right, and one more question I had about your current role, as in like you're at factories all the time. Who's the persona you're selling to?
So it varies. So I think the challenge with, and I've seen this with kind of sales engineering more broadly, is there's the bottom up and there's a top down sell.
Yep.
And quite often when I'm going and looking around locations, it's going to be those people who are in the operational role. They're managing the day to day, and what they're my end users, if you like, and it
Yeah.
without getting into the ins and outs of what the different products do, there's
Yeah.
an end user component to it, and then there's a kind of a black box component to it as well. But there's those kind of end users, but then the people who are really, really critical are the directors, are the VPs, are the C-level, because they don't kind of care what the product actually does. But I'm having to go, well, look, this is the ROI, this is the efficiency you're going to gain from implementing this solution. So it's that it becomes that kind of top down. And quite often the challenge is, and I'll be speaking to quite technical IT people, technical language, in the detail, and then the next call they go, right, I'm going to bring on my boss or my boss's boss, and that will be a VP of IT or CIO, and they're still technical guys, but they don't care about the technicalities. They care about the strategic. What does this mean for me and for the business overall? So it kind of, it's those two different kind of groups that I'm often in front of.
Yeah.
I have to navigate around.
Okay. So you're not because when you said factories, I thought you might be selling to actually factory employees, people who like.
No, it's probably like a level up from there. So it's probably like the manager. So it's like if it's a factory or a warehouse, it'd be like the warehouse manager. So it'd be the
Right.
person who is responsible for kind of making sure things work. It would either be them or it would be somebody in IT. It's because it's still software.
Yeah.
It's not hardware, and I think like I'll kind of go and I'll meet with the guys on the shop floor on, you know, understanding what they're doing, and because I think it's important to obviously make sure that anything you bring in, you're not having a negative impact on those guys.
Yeah.
But they're not the ones who are making the decision. It's coming probably from a manager level, and then getting pushed up, because also we're quite often being driven by other factors that are being changed. It's sort of like you don't just come in and say, oh, hey, I'm now going to change like this small piece of my supply chain. There'll be an overall like project. So they've been told, right, we're bringing in this solution here. You've got to go and find someone that's going to work with it.
Right.
And it's then about working through, okay, what's the impact? So yeah, going around the factories is often kind of seeing how they do things, and that I like to think old-fashioned discovery that we used to do. Like, again, you go on site, you tour, you meet people that are using it.
Yeah.
Now it's obviously you don't get that so much, kind of cutting straight to the manager level, and then people making those more decisions. Yeah, that's who I'm kind of typically selling to. But I have had to stand and present to an audience that's stretched everywhere from a guy whose job is operating machinery,
Right.
and then all the way around the table to the CIO and the CTO, and kind of having to give the same presentation and engage all of those personas in quite a short space of time, which is quite challenging, because often the senior people are just looking at their teams and going, are you happy? Does this work? Because that's their primary concern.
And you mentioned like before COVID, you'd visit the factories and you'd do discovery there.
Yeah.
How has, like, right now you can't visit the factories, so you're doing more higher level discovery.
Yeah.
Do you find that discovery has suffered because of that, or have you overcome that somehow?
I would say that it was a challenge initially. Right, 3.5 years ago, it was a real struggle, because all of a sudden everything shut down.
Right.
And we went, oh, how are we gonna, like, everyone just obviously sort of panicked a little bit. I would say that it's not suffered now. I would say that it's evolved. And I think one of my kind of philosophies, one of my things that I talk about on LinkedIn a lot, is how what happened over the last 3.5 years has really accelerated the pace of progress in sales engineering and how we engage. And if you talk about discovery in particular, let's talk about everyone's favorite topic, which is disco demos, right? We get into that because when you're, because it's like everyone's time suddenly kind of got condensed. So everyone's calendars filled up with Teams meetings. The amount of time that we have to engage with customers got condensed. So, right, and then you're into I've now got to do disco demos and stuff. And in reality, when I was going on site, we would probably do some kind of demo in that time, but that would be half a day that we'd have.
Right.
And there'll be a component of it that'll be a factory tour, there'll be a component of it that will be a demo, there'll be a component that will be the sort of general discussion. And that's all now just been squeezed into like these 1 hour blocks where you need to find out enough information to know, is this real? Do we have a solution? Are we going to fit, into their price bracket? And what do I need to show them in the next call to convince them that we've got something for them? So discovery's really had to, I like the word pivot and change and evolve, and say now my discovery calls are much more, I'll do that research up front. I'll kind of look up the company, and I think it's become a lot more like, rather than you going and asking people a bunch of questions, you need to look up and it's good practice. It was always good practice before, but I think the onus is now on SEs in particular. Understand that company, understand their industry, because 9 times out of 10 they're going to have the same challenges, broadly the same challenges. And you can kind of say, okay, so we know from other customers that you do this, that this is a common thing we see. Is that a challenge you have? And that helps to kind of get to where you need to be much quicker than if you're kind of going through the old-fashioned discovery of how does your process work today? What tools are you using? What systems are you using?
Right.
Because that just chews up time, and everyone's like, I don't have time. I have to jump from this call to the next call to the next call to the next call. Can we just, show me a demo, give me the price?
Yeah. I mean, you were mentioning earlier that it was transactional and less value based. It sounds like it's more transactional now, because you don't get to build those relationships. You don't get to, I mean, you're showing value within like a half hour, like disco demo. So how does it feel for you? Like, is it working for you? Do you like it? Do you enjoy it that way? Because I think I wouldn't enjoy it that way, but I want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, sure. So I think the transactional side was, so one of the things was the history of the company, and a lot of the products we used to sell was smaller value deals, and that's where it was the transactional stuff. Because it was like, it was a product, had a very specific use case. It was much more like a widget. Like someone comes to you and says, "Hey, Paul, I need a pen." Okay, I've got a pen. You can buy the pen. Now I'm saying, they're like, right, I need a solution because I have to get a stationery supplier that needs to fit all of these requirements, and that's pens, pencils, erasers, rulers. Can you give me an overview of what, and I want that to come on a regular basis. And the relationship thing is really interesting, because I actually find that, and this isn't true with everyone, but where people are at home and people are more remote, is it's actually opened up some opportunities that you wouldn't get in a kind of conventional business setting. Because if you go onto a customer site and you sit there and you're suited and booted and you have it's much more formal. When everyone's kind of at home, people's kids, people's dogs come in, like things kind of happen. So you kind of have that chance to build that relationship. And I think as an SE, I'm probably now more involved in the sale than I was before.
Okay.
Because it becomes, rather than like 1 or 2 big engagements, and then I might help produce a statement of work and then they'll close the deal out, it's now sort of all kind of chopped up. So I think the frustration comes from sometimes being like, we just need to, being able to strike that right balance between giving people the information they're looking for and getting to kind of, getting enough out of it that I can scope the solution correctly. But I think in that, you do still have opportunity to build a relationship, because you're not doing that like one big discovery call.
Right.
It often becomes a lot more back and forth over calls, over email. And I think you can still, there's like, it's, it's useful that I'm from a generation that built relationships online.
Right. Yeah.
Because that really helps, right? Because I'm used to building relationships with people just over like forums and social media,
Right.
without having to sit down and meet them face to face, and that's always great. And I still think that nothing beats being in front of people in real life.
Yeah.
But I still think it's not. I don't think that kind of that sort of splitting up of how that engagement has necessarily damaged how we engage. It just means we've had to adapt.
So I'm hearing many things. I'm going to try to summarize them the way I understand them, and let me know.
Sure, yeah.
One, instead of having two big touch points, basically you're splitting up the touch points into multiple smaller ones, and that seems that it allows to build more relationship because you have more touch points instead of you come in once or twice and then they forget about you.
Yeah.
You're on top of mind. That's one. Two, it's moving from this is how we do things. We do a big discovery and then we come on site and do a big demo, to this is how you need things done. We're going to do small discovery and we're going to give you a taste of what it would look like. And if you're interested, we can keep talking more. Mm-hmm. So it's like it went from being selfish or this is how we do things to this is how you need things to be done, so we can adapt to that. Does that sound accurate so far?
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Okay.
It's two words. Two words that sum it up. It's buyer enablement.
Yeah.
Is what it is. It's about giving people what they need when they need it.
Right. Man, you just said it much more succinctly than I did. Okay.
But the thing is, I had to hear you play it back to me to get there, because I sort of was brain dumb. I was like, here's how I say it. And I think the final thing on discovery is that, like, discovery doesn't end. And I think we've had some discussion on LinkedIn about this. And I've heard sometimes people are like, oh, well, if you give a demo, then your discovery window is closed. You can't do anymore. And I'm just like, but discovery is something that you're always learning.
Every meeting is a discovery.
Every meeting is exactly, and you just have to pivot with that, and you've got to be like, oh, at the end of the last meeting, you said you want to learn about this thing.
Yeah.
Oh, here's something. Here's that piece.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I remember that post. Like every meeting is a discovery. Every meeting is a demo. So maybe you're not actually demoing, but you might be whiteboarding. You're doing other things. So. Yeah, that was a good conversation. Okay, that's. You mentioned you build relationships online through forums, and you also mentioned that you feel like sales engineering is changing from before the pandemic, obviously, to after the pandemic. Beyond the sales cycle, the SE role, how is that changing in your eyes?
So I think the big shift from the SE role is from being this sort of more supportive position, just that arguably, right?
Sales support.
Sales support. Right, okay, but it kind of always was, because, and I think we were always kind of hemmed into that because our engagement was driven by what the sales got when we were needed by our sales counterparts.
Yeah.
When was it that we were needed? So it was less that we were there just kind of holding them up, but it was like they would bring us in, they'd tag us in when they needed us to kind of come on board.
Right.
Where I see the role going now, and I mentioned buyer enablement just there, is shifting towards a couple of things. One of them is content creation. And by content, I mean blogs, I mean videos, I mean training materials that you can then either give to your sales team or give to your buyers, potential buyers. And that's one side of it. And I think the other side is that it's becoming more of a sales role. It's always that, we both know Chris White, he always says, 60% of pre-sales is sales. But I think that we are having to more actively engage in things like negotiation, in getting into that closing, because as it becomes harder to close deals in the current economic environment, we are called upon more to be, another voice. We are really co-piloting in that opportunity, and that we're also there. We're just as much of a trusted advisor, just as important to building that trust with the customer as the salesperson is, and our influence has grown significantly in that way.
So you mentioned a couple of things. You mentioned content creation and negotiation. I want to dig into both, but I'm going to start with negotiation.
Yeah.
Most SEs don't go into sales, pure sales, because they don't want to negotiate.
Mm-hmm.
So can you elaborate a little bit more what you mean by SEs being part of negotiation?
So yeah, I would say my view is a lot of SEs, and the reason I didn't go into sales personally was offered it was because of prospecting.
Okay.
I can negotiate, but it's the prospecting that puts me off. But you're right. Okay, it is a lot of convention. A lot of people look at sales engineering. I agree, and they go, I don't want to do pure sales. I don't want to carry the bag. I don't want to have the risk. I don't want to go through that. And
I don't want to ask for the PO.
yeah, I don't want to be chasing the PO down. But the negotiation side, I would say more broadly, if you think about closing deals, and that's when you've done all your demos, you've gotten to the person who's going to sign off on the deal, who's going to sign the contract. And it's about being able to articulate the business case to that level. And kind of when it's talking about negotiation, it's less negotiating price. There is an aspect of that, and kind of saying, well, you know, and it varies on organization, because some organizations, pre-sales have no say over how the price works, what the license is, what the services is.
Yep.
Sometimes, you'll find you have more influence on that, and so I would say it becomes more of an internal negotiation with saying to sales, hey, look, or to your kind of management saying, look, if we go and we give this level of discount, I think we're going to get the opportunity over the line. So it's that sort of side in the negotiation, but it's that getting into those closing calls when you're kind of pushing the customer to say, yes, I'm going to commit to this year, this quarter, this month, because you've convinced me. So I think it's negotiation is, I guess, the point in the sales process that comes before we've won it, but it's everything that happens. When I was first in sales engineering, I would do my discovery, I would do my big demo, and then I'd hear 3 months later, hey, we closed that deal.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, awesome. Great. I am tracking deals much, 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 much closer.
Right.
And I'm being asked to support those calls much more often, even if it's just like I'm pinging on my phone over email or on Teams with my account exec as he's on the call to say, what about this? Here's things you should say. Yeah, it's that engagement.
Well, so here's the thing. I always say that every time an SE opens their mouth, they're either adding value or removing value from the deal, effectively making every call a negotiation call.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So when you're jumping on the call with a customer, if you're shooting your product in the foot or yourself in the foot, you just made it harder for the salesperson to negotiate. Right. But if you just answer technical questions, that means the salesperson is going to have to negotiate on price because you didn't differentiate yourself in any way, shape, or form. But if you're solving a problem, a business problem, if you're showing them that you're going to be reducing time, risk, or money, then you just did half of the negotiation.
Yeah.
Right? And now all the salesperson has to do is close. So an SE has a big effect on the negotiation process and the proposal. And also an SE can can work with the salesperson to help them build a business case for why we're proposing this versus that. Maybe they're not in the room at the negotiation table every time, but they are definitely part of the negotiation. So I 100% agree with you. I wanted your thoughts about that, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, sure.
And in terms of content creation,
yeah,
I always think about SEs as mini marketing people. Like we're instead of marketing on scale, we're marketing to a team, a small team of decision makers. What are your thoughts on content creation? Like, how does it help the SE? I mean, it sounds like more work, right? Rather than. So, how does it actually help? What is the value? Sure. If you were to negotiate and convince an SE to do content creation, what is the value for them?
So I 100% agree to start with the SEs, and I love that. Like, it's a mini marketing role because it is a marketing role, and I think the people who are going to thrive in this career now are the ones who look at this as a being a market, you need to bring that marketing type acumen in, thinking like a marketer, and collaborating with your marketing team, working with them, saying, what do you need? Because buyers are looking for more technical information earlier on. SEs are the people that have that.
Yeah.
If I was to sit with SEs and they would say, look, you're now telling me I've now got to do all these discovery calls, disco demo calls, I've got to do a bunch of overview demos, and I'm now going to create content, how's that going to help? The answer is, if you are creating quality, strong content, you're going to be able to automate a lot of what you do. That it's automating that like bottom 30% that you hate doing. Think about all the things that you like. You're like, oh God, I wake up and I go, I've got to do 3 demos today, and they're all the same. and it's like, I'm going to have the same script. I'm going to say it 3 times, and by the end of it, I'm going to be exhausted. And I'm probably going to screw up at one point in those, because we all do, but it's natural.
Yeah.
If I said, well, and I'm not going to kind of there's a variety of different tools out there and different ways you can achieve this. But if you said, right, well, actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a really great product demo in a video that captures everything I give in that. Maybe it's a 20-30 minute demo. That's another topic we can come to another day, right? How long demos should be. But I'm going to condense that into 10-12 minutes. And that's going to hit all those key points, because, as I said earlier, the personality I'm saying to, sometimes it comes a bit of a feature function, sometimes it's feature function, but then also you have to sell the value. You need to show feature function to the right people. You need to show value to the right people.
Yeah.
People ultimately want to see how it works, and they want to feel like they've seen buttons be clicked. And if you can say, well, look, I'm going to take, here's like the 5 different variations of my demo that I give every week. I'm going to record those. And it might take a few takes. You might want to go and finesse it, edit it a little bit, kind of take the highlights. But if I can do that, and if I can give that over to my SDRs, to my account execs, and say, hey, when you get that first kind of lead come in and you're going through qualification, and we need to do a demo, some level of demo to qualify the deal, because that's what the customer wants to see, here's a video. You don't need to bring me into a call. Here's that content. And so immediately you've allowed yourself to kind of automate away the lower value activities in your day and focus on the high value. We've talked about building business cases, building value, negotiation. That's high value activity SEs, and that's what has the impact. And that's what, when you're at a sales meeting, that's what gets called out in front of everyone is, hey, Ramsey did an amazing job in this call with the CIO where he really articulated the value. They're not talking about the demo that you did 9 months ago with that first guy. And if you can automate that, amazing.
So I want to add to your to that. Like, basically, I agree 100%, and I want to point out that you're probably not the only SE on the team. So if there's 5 of you, that's 5 different pieces of content. You didn't have to create all 5. That can be shared with the team, and then then you're moving on from a marketing qualified lead or a sales qualified lead to what consensus would call a demo qualified lead. Right? We were talking about Mark Green, the head of pre-sales there, so that's what they go with. Like, it's a demo qualified lead, which also enables you, if you don't want to do a disco demo because you've already done the demo, it enables the SE to get into deeper conversations with the customer, because they already saw the product, and now they can ask deeper questions about the product. And as an SE, you'll get more insight based on the questions that they ask about what's important, what's not important, which will also allow you in the negotiation process to actually say, like, hey, they asked about these things, which means this is important for them. So now when we're doing the proposal or the presentation based on their requirements, now we have more information about that. By the way, this is why I love doing the podcast, because I didn't think about that until you just said a few words, which triggered some thoughts in my head. This is great. And also, if you're the only SE doing it on the team, it definitely differentiate you from the rest of the team. So if you want that principal solution architect role or that management role, you have an edge over other people. But if you really want to show your leadership skills, you convince other people to do the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a final, I guess, thought on that is, and I, that also then can be a way to open up all the other possible routes that you can go from being a sales engineer.
Yep.
You could go into marketing, you could go into product marketing. You could go and be an evangelist. It kind of starts to open up your opportunities. I completely agree, right? You stand out from the crowd because people go, oh, hey, this person's really into it. You level up everyone around you,
Yep.
because you're showing them how to do it. But you're going to have more people want to come and work with you because they'll be like, because ultimately it's your face out there,
Right.
so you're getting recognition of who you are as an individual,
Yeah.
as well.
So I am curious. I mean, I think you just answered it, but you post a lot on LinkedIn that's not related to your products or your solutions. You just post about sales engineering. Why do you do that?
So back in April of 2022, I'll say, I went to a pre-sales event in London for the pre-sales collective. A guy there called Nick Capozzi. He used to work in DemoStack. He now runs a company called Splice Video. Great guy, really kind of, and go and check his content out. But I got chatting to him and he was like, there is nobody doing, or there's very few people doing pre-sales targeted content on LinkedIn. And I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. Let's kind of take a look. It was April 21. It was 2 years ago. And I was like, right, okay, let's see how it goes. Let's see how things kind of play out. And I kind of got into it because I was like, no one's doing it. There's salespeople, sales like influencers doing it. And for me, it was just a really fun experiment. Like I kind of started doing it because I was like, hey, let's just see how this goes. And I've kept doing it because of the conversations that it sparks and the opportunities. I mean, we're having this conversation. A lot of it is because of some of that content, right? That's what's put that visibility out there. But it's also because I just love this career. And I think it needs to be shouted about from the rooftops more than it is today. And I think in doing that, it's like, hey, look, this is the job that, like, here's all the amazing things about being in sales engineering, in pre-sales. And it kind of starts to build that awareness, and it builds some, opportunities for me. And it means I've had, been on podcasts, I've been able to kind of meet people that I wouldn't have otherwise met. But it also then, by creating that content in my own time around, pre-sales, it's also then working on those skills that will in turn come back and benefit what I'm then doing professionally. And I know that because I've done that, I've had people in my marketing team say, hey, we'd love you to come and do that for the company, because you've clearly got a taste for it and you clearly enjoy doing it and you're good at doing it.
So if you were to give advice to someone who's a sales engineer who wants to start content creation, what would you recommend doing first? Talking about sales engineering or talking about their product or their industry?
I would say find a topic that you're interested in. So that could be sales engineering. That could be sales engineering in your specific industry. So the number of guys who talk specifically about sales engineering and cybersecurity, for example. It could be sales engineering in IT. It could be in in your specific kind of world. But it needs to be something that you have an interest in. So it could be pure sales engineering. It could be something about what you do as a role. It could be really anything that interests you. And just start. Just try. Because it, once you start doing it, and if I think about my early posts, I cringe, but I know that I had to do that to get to where I am now. Yeah. If I didn't do that, then I wouldn't. It's a muscle, and you'll see everyone posts about creating content. It's a muscle. You've got to work on it. You've got to exercise it, and you've got to build that. So that's my advice. I mean, obviously, take a look at my LinkedIn. Take a look at your LinkedIn. Kind of go and look up like hashtag sales engineering on LinkedIn. Have a look at the kind of stuff. have a look at some of the stuff like on TikTok as well, right? Look at sales and pre-sales stuff on there. It's another great platform, and see what kind of thing people are doing, and kind of see, what sparks your interest. Because it's got to be unique to you, and it's got to be something you're interested in.
There's no one size fits all, and the hardest step is always the first step. I love that. All right, Paul, we're almost at the end of our hour, so it's time to jump into the not so fire round. These are the same 4 questions I ask almost every guest, so I'd love to hear your thoughts. Starting with question number 1, obviously. Earlier, you mentioned that when you went into management the first time, you're falling out of love of sales engineering. So the flip side of that, why do you even love sales engineering?
Yeah, I will just say it's quite surreal to be answering these questions because I've always thought about how I'd answer them when I've listened. But what I love is 2 things. Well, 2, maybe 3. The first one is I love the opportunity that it creates. And by that, I mean the opportunity to have a day that is completely different every day. And you never quite know how your day is going to go, what you're going to have the opportunity to do, who you're going to get to speak to, where you might get to go around the world, who you might get to engage with, but also where it might take you in your career. I think it's just this kind of Pandora's box of opportunity of being in sales engineering. I think the second thing that I really love now and I've come to really love is the community. We talked about LinkedIn a lot. I've talked about PreSales Collective. I think there's a really, really strong community. And I think the thing that I love about sales engineers is when I get in a room of sales engineers, I don't have to explain to anybody what my job is. Everyone just gets it.
Yeah.
And it's that camaraderie that we all kind of come from very different backgrounds, but we all have this kind of shared love for sales engineering. I think the third thing is that it allows you to make of what you want to. So make of it what you want.
Yes.
Right? We talked about what my vision of sales engineering is. As an SE, you can decide what type of SE you want to be. And if you're good at it and if you deliver, that's all that matters.
Okay, that's the most complete answer we've had on the show. So love that. All right, question number 2. If you were to talk to your boss right now, what would he or she say is your superpower?
I think probably my willingness. Well, it's difficult. It's 2 things. I'd say probably one of them being my willingness to kind of just to adapt to a situation, to take what's coming my way and adapt to it. And I think the way that my boss has articulated that to me, and my director has said, he's like, I've been through a lot of change, like the company I've worked for, been through a lot of change in that time. And he's like, you're that person who has always managed to grab onto it with both hands and ride the change to really maximize your own benefit from it. So I think that adaptability, that flexibility, and I think within that, the kind of the creative side, the way to kind of maybe look at things from a maybe a slightly left field perspective as well. I would probably say I'd have to ask him that now.
Okay, I'd love to hear. If you do ask him, I'd love to hear his response.
Okay.
So cool. It seems that you're going to be going to management again. So question number 3, by the way, next year. If there is one book you would gift to your SEs, what would it be? The
6 Habits of Highly Effective Sales Engineers.
All right. Chris White's check is in the mail for you.
No, Chris knows, but I mean, there's a lot of books. Yep. If I can give a non-sales engineering answer, it would be a book I read quite recently called Create Space.
Okay.
By Derek Draper. Highly recommend it to everybody. I actually listened to it on audiobook, but it's all about, as the name suggests, right, creating space in your life, in your work, and having that balance between delivering what you need to do in your job, but also having space to reflect and to think. And I say that because sales engineering is a tough job. I love it, but it's intense.
Yeah.
And I think we sometimes need to have a reminder to just take a breath and allow ourselves to just, recharge a little bit.
Nice. Okay. The last question of the not so fire round, Paul. Is there a habit you're working on today to improve in your personal or professional life?
Yeah. So it's funny you mentioned that because I'm a big fan of trying to build. I've read Atomic Habits, which is, if we're playing sales engineering LinkedIn bingo. And I, for my own, I have traits of ADHD and I'm autistic. So having structure is really, really key in my day. So having a habit of being able to know what's happening, and that particular habit right now is building a morning routine where I have a set of things that I go through that I do every day. Not big things, that I drink some water, that I meditate for 5 minutes, that I go and exercise, that I clear my desk, literally and figuratively, and that I kind of set myself in for the day. So it's about kind of not coming in and just turning on my laptop and just getting stuck in, but just giving myself a set of things to go through and kind of check off and go, right, I now feel like I've, this is setting me up for a good day. I've checked through that list, and it means that I'm not losing track of stuff or feeling like I'm falling behind. One thing that I started back in the summer that I need to get back on is actually I started writing a newsletter. The link to it is on my LinkedIn, and I've not been very good at keeping on top of that. But it's I want to start building those habits of having a routine, so I can go, right, I know that I'm going to just chip away at that thing every single day, and start to just have that consistent approach, which is tough, especially when you have young kids, as I know you know, because they have their own routines. And
where is your new? I'm on your LinkedIn.
Yeah. So
do you mind sharing that with me? I'll put it in the show notes as well.
Yeah, sure. So if you go to techsalesunplugged.com, that'll take you to it. But I'll show the link. It's a Substack.
Okay.
I kind of got off really strong and published 5 or 6 posts, and then summer happened and I was super busy with home stuff, and I kind of haven't gotten back on it. But it is absolutely what I want to do, and I think I want to start doing more long form kind of content as well. I think that kind of super interests me. But yeah, I'll shoot the link.
All right. Yeah, show me the link, and I'll look forward. I'll sign up, and I'll look forward to
perfect
seeing from you. And I think that's all I have for today. Yeah, you were over prepared. You sound like a sales engineer. So I do appreciate your time, Paul. If people want to connect with you, where can they do that? You mentioned
LinkedIn. Yeah, is going to be the best place. Always happy to have a conversation. Drop me a connection, shoot me a message. I'll ping my meeting link out. As hopefully people can tell, I love nothing more than talking about sales engineering. and I think if you're a sales engineer, if you're wanting to get into it, if you just want to have a chat about what it even involves, or if you see something I've written and you vehemently disagree, I'd love to hear from you, because I think any debate, any healthy debate is good. Whether you agree or disagree.
I love the healthy part. All right, man. Paul, I appreciate your time, and
thanks, Ramsey. Great to
talk to you again.
Cheers. Thank you. Have a good day, sir. Bye.
And that brings us to the end of the show. Thank you, Paul, for coming on, and thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you took something out of this call. Again, the topics, we covered a lot of topics from his journey, him being thrust into management, him getting out of management, how he got out of it, and how he's going to go back into it again, the role of the sales engineer, how it's changing, and how people can improve. And I just enjoyed talking to Paul in general. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And I think that's it. With that, I'm signing off.